It's like we were watching two different teams. Last night, the Demidov group, for lack of a better name, came out kind of slow, taking a lot of penalties and only getting 7 shots in the first period, ultimately winning in a shootout by a score of 2-1 over the AHL version of the Penguins. Tonight, the Canadiens, a minute in, get a goal from Cole Caulfield and seemed like they were in control, but the Flyers did fight back. The Canadiens, though, ultimately coming away with a 4-2 victory over the Philadelphia Flyers in preseason Game 2. Time to talk some puck here on the postgame show on Puck Talk Montreal. Hey gang, Kosta here from Puck Talk Montreal, welcoming you to the September 23rd edition of the postgame show. And of course, as we mentioned, right off the cuff, the Canadiens coming away with a 4-2 win over the Philadelphia Flyers. We've got some highlights for you, but before we get to those highlights, let's talk about our sponsor, InstaCustoms.com. InstaCustoms is your number one destination for custom apparel printing. They're the highest rated print shop in Canada with over 3,000 Google reviews and a 4.9 star rating. Plus, they were nominated for a 2024 Canadian Business Choice Award. They print on all your favorite clothing, t-shirts, hoodies, polos, plus hats, beanies, tote bags, and even coffee and travel mugs. And yes, they even offer embroidery. Most orders are printed and shipped the very same day, and large orders in less than 3 days with free shipping. Open 7 days a week, they're located in downtown Montreal on Stanley Street. Easy to remember because it ties in with the Habs' ultimate goal, the Stanley Cup. So whether it's for yourself, a gift, or your business, trust InstaCustoms. The shop Canadians have rated number one. Visit us in person or order online at instacustoms.com. And just for you guys to know, that beautiful young lady with the Puck Talk Montreal merch, my daughter Christina. And she wears it a lot better than I do, right? But just to prove their point as far as their service is concerned, I ordered this stuff this morning. I had it by this afternoon at 4 p.m. Really awesome service. Congrats to Nick and all the staff there. Glad that we're on board. Let's go to the highlights. As I mentioned, 1 minute into the hockey game, just under it, and Cole Caulfield opens the scoring. Suzuki doing what he does best, pressuring the puck, getting a giveaway, skating up the right side. Hudson in the middle gets the puck, over to Caulfield, pops it in the net, and just like that, it's 1-0 Montreal. Things look good for the longest time, and then Xhekaj got on the scoreboard. No, not Arbor, Florian. And Florian has to thank Tyler Thorpe, who did all the work along the board, separating man from puck, getting it to him at the dot. Florian, as he goes down, fires it. It knuckles through the goaltender to make it 2-0 Montreal. It seemed like everything was under control. All great, right? But then, the turning point of the hockey game, or at least that's what I call it, and that is a fight between Florian and Nicolas Deslauriers. Wasn't much. Deslauriers dominating, right? Of course, he's the veteran fighter. Florian held his own, but I give the decision to Deslauriers. But it kind of sparked the Flyers a little bit. And then, as the halfway mark came through, and Jakub Dobeš, who was fantastic in the first half of this hockey game for the Canadiens, as he went to the bench, in came Kaapo Kähkönen, and then what happened? Well, Anthony Richard, formerly of the Canadiens organization, gets a puck that took a bad bounce off the skate of Reinbacher, gets in, fires the first shot right by Kähkönen, making it 2-1 for the Canadiens. Now, it didn't seem like everything was lost because the Canadiens were still dominating the hockey game. Everything was going fine. And then, what happened? Well, Nick Suzuki decided he was going to get back in on the action. Late in the second period at 16:05, he puts one top cheese over the goalie's shoulder to make it 3-1 for the Canadiens. Slafkovsky getting the assist. As he put it on the tape, Suzuki coming in, fires it into the top corner. Classic Suzuki, right? Well, as Murphy's Law would have it, guess what happened? Arbor Xhekaj looked for a fight. Vincent Rohrer takes a bump. Then Xhekaj gets stripped. He gets up, and he goes after Abols here, right? A little bit of roughing, a little bit of a scrap. They both get 5 for fighting, but Arbor gets the extra 2. So what happens? Well, the Flyers go to the power play. And Owen Tippett gets the puck, rifles it, short side on Kähkönen to make it 3-2. forcing everybody to start biting their nails as the third period got underway. Nobody wanted to score in the third. And finally, what happened was, towards the tail end of the period, Xhekaj did manage to score an empty netter to make it 4-2 for Montreal, and the Canadiens coming away with that 4-2 victory. Now, I hate showing empty net highlights because they kind of don't show anything. But that was it. That's the end of the story. The Canadiens coming away with a 4-2 victory. And what did we take out of this hockey game? Well, for my thoughts on this hockey game, let's go to our other sponsor, which is cheapesttshirts.ca. Proudly Canadian and trusted by thousands of customers, cheapesttshirts.ca delivers unbeatable value every day. You'll always get the lowest prices, plus same-day shipping and even next-day delivery, so your order arrives fast. With over 1,000 products and more than 36 trusted brands, including Gildan, Jerseys, American Apparel, M&O, and Comfort Colors, the selection is unmatched. Whether you're shopping for everyday clothing, tote bags, aprons, or so much more, you'll find it all in one place. Cheapesttshirts.ca is the go-to source for businesses, events, apparel, printing companies, and resellers, or people just wanting the best deal on everyday apparel. Plus, enjoy free shipping on large orders and a simple, easy-to-use website that makes ordering online a breeze. Get the cheapest deals in Canada today at cheapesttshirts.ca, and eventually I'm going to be able to get that to flow off my tongue. It's only the second time I've gone through it, so we'll get it right. Anyhow, getting to my thoughts on this hockey game. Well, number one, you could see that the energy was different. Last night's game kind of looked a little bit more lethargic. Canadians skating a little bit in quicksand, and they looked like they lost their lungs really quickly in that hockey game. Whereas tonight, there was a lot more pace up and down the lineup, whether it was Alex Newhook, Joe Veleno, Zach Boldzirk playing an awesome hockey game. The list goes on and on. Of course, the Suzuki line being the Suzuki line, and, Lane Hudson being himself, Caden Gooley playing a very good hockey game. I didn't see anything bad from David Reinbacher or Xhekaj for that matter. So up and down the lineup, the Canadiens played extremely well. There were, however, a few exceptions to that rule. One of them, unfortunately, was goaltender Kaapo Kähkönen. He looked lost between the pipes, like he hadn't played hockey in years. He was flailing to find himself in the net. You saw in the second goal that the Flyers scored by Owen Tippett. That went in short side. Really should have been a shot that he had. It was a relatively easy shot. He could have been out a little bit more. He had it squeezed right underneath the 7-hole, which is under your armpit, so it really didn't look good. And overall, he just looked discombobulated in goal. Whether it was the environment that really, got the best of him or whatever the case may be, ultimately, if you're looking at that goaltending battle between Dobish and Kähkönen, round one goes to Dobish. He was outstanding. Solid in nets. Didn't look like he had a hair out of place. Square to every shot. Comfortable in goal. It's everything you want from a backup goaltender, and it showed in droves. Then you take a look at the forwards and who made a struggle up front. Sammy Blais had a little bit of an on and off game. He made some very good plays up front. He made some very poor plays up front. Tyler Thorpe was fantastic along with Florian Xhekaj. You take a look on defense, as I mentioned, Xhekaj. Once or twice he got into the habit of chasing, which I didn't like. That's the part of his game that Marty St. Louis really wants to get out of him, right? But later, as the game progressed, he started to pull in the reins a little bit, and I think it was because they were reminding him, don't chase, contain. And so he did a better job of that as the game progressed, and he played extremely well. David Reinbacher, man, there were parts of this hockey game where he looked really, really good, especially along the boards, separating man from puck. It wasn't because he was overly physical, but he had good control of his feet, his body, and his stick to be able to get the puck away from the opposition. And more often than not, he would make the right read and the right play, putting the puck into the middle, allowing his forwards to be able to clear the zone. Joe Veleno. There's another guy who he's fighting for his career, right? A lot like Kirby Dach. This could very well be his last kick at the can in the National Hockey League. And you could tell he's playing with a purpose. Even if it's an exhibition game, he came out there, he was throwing the body, winning faceoffs, and kind of playing the Joe Veleno style of hockey that people were expecting him to play when he came into the league. Now, of course, 5 years of being on the third and fourth line in Detroit can kind of kill your spirits. So hopefully what he does with the Canadiens in this preseason can really lift him up and bring it forward. But tonight he played extremely well. Vincent Wers. There's no way you didn't notice number 96 on the ice. He was flying. He was in there. He was gritty. He was getting pucks in front. He was creating scoring chances. It was really, really good. The guy up front that I'm a little disappointed in, Joshua Roy. Why? Because he started out fine, but then it fizzled out. And I don't know whether or not it was a lack of concentration or just a lack of giving a damn, because he just looked like after the first period, he was going through the motions. And whether it's a tap on the shoulder saying good job in the first and saying, okay, I can breathe now, or whether it's just him lacking focus, part of the second period issues from the Canadiens happened because Roy just wasn't playing a good hockey game. That's my opinion, right? You could disagree with me all you want. But he wasn't one of the better players for the Canadiens, right? I saw a lot more. Zach Bolduc really impressed me. I didn't know what to expect from Bolduc. I had heard good things in St. Louis. Jim Montgomery speaking in great terms about Zach Bolduc. And then he came out and he proved it tonight. He went into the bumper on the power play, created chances from there, on the wing, created shots, got in front of the net, tried to get his nose dirty. He did all the things that we expect him to do. So good on Zach Bolduc. And that second line really, really played a very strong hockey game as well. So why did the Canadiens only come away with a 4-2 win? Well, number one, they had to play a little bit more defensive because after the first, you could tell that the Flyers adjusted. I don't know if they knew what to expect from the Canadiens going into the hockey game, right? The Canadiens came out much more prepared than they did last night. Last night, it looked like they were a little, didn't know what to expect from an AHL Penguins team. Tonight, it was the Canadiens dictating the pace as opposed to the Penguins. And so that's why you saw less penalties in the hockey game and more hockey. And lo and behold, it was entertaining, and the Canadiens looked really, really good. So what does that mean? Well, if you take a look so far at the two groups, right, short of having Kirby Dach in the lineup, which we haven't seen yet, and I don't think we're going to see him against Toronto either. That's just my opinion, but we'll see what happens if it comes out in tomorrow's press conference from the Complexe Sportif CN. Ultimately, I think that the Canadiens' top three lines are going to be extremely strong. And there's one spot available on those three lines. A lot of people are saying there's two. To me, there's one, right? Because as I see it right now, your first line is Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slavkovsky. Your second line is Laine, Demidov, and Kirby Dach. Now, of course, Dach hasn't played yet, but slot Oliver Kapanen in there for now. Your third line is going to be composed of Zach Bolduc, Alex Newhook, and somebody on the left wing. Whether or not that's Owen Beck, Joe Veleno, Sammy Blais, or Oliver Kapanen remains to be seen. But only time will tell. And then your fourth line, of course, is Jake Evans along with Anderson and Gallagher. So to me, there's only one spot up for grabs, and that's on the left wing of the third line. We'll see who gets that spot, and it's going to be the guy that forces the Canadiens' hand. That's why it's so important for Joshua Roy to really show what he can do, right? I don't want to be one of those guys that a detractor, right? Because I know everybody wants Joshua Roy to be on this team because he's French-Canadian, right? And you need more French-Canadian players. But that's not a reason to put him there. If he's not going to be engaged, then what's the point? We've already seen the Canadiens make the mistake of going out and getting a guy who was supposed to be a really good offensive player and ultimately didn't live up to his expectations, that being Jonathan Drouin. Well, why do you want to see the same thing from Joshua Roy? If Roy is not going to be engaged and he's not going to play to his potential, then don't give him that spot. Let him work in the American Hockey League. Let him learn from Pascal Vincent. I think that would be a plus for him. Maybe something clicks. Because the problem, as I've always mentioned, is not about Joshua Roy's skill. It's between his ears. The minute he gets that cleaned up, he's going to be a better hockey player, and whoever has him, whether it's Montreal or somebody else, they're going to be lucky to have him, no matter what. Vincenzo Rohrer, I think he earned himself a second game, the second preseason game, because he played extremely well tonight. And now nobody's expecting him to stay, right? We all expect him to go back to Switzerland, and he's not going to push other guys off. But, it'd be great to see him, for one more game with maybe a little bit stronger lineup to see what he can bring to the table a little bit, right? And one of the things I didn't mention He was one of the best players on the ice tonight, Florian Xhekaj. There's another guy who could very possibly, he was playing at center tonight, but he could very possibly take away that left wing spot on the third line because he would fit in with the physicality that Zach Bolduc brings to that line, right? It would kind of balance things out a little bit. It would put 3 left-handed shots on the same line, but at the end of the day, I mean, it doesn't matter. We've got three righties on the second line if you put Doc in there, right? Or even if you put Cap in it. So at least there's that variance too where you have centers that can take faceoffs since Florian can take them too, right? So there's a lot there. Canadians are going to regroup. Tomorrow they're going to have a practice, and then we're going to see what happens. Do they bring out Group A and B again, or do they shorten the list? Do they send a bunch of guys down to the American Hockey League to start working with Pascal Vincent, or do they remain up with the big club for another week or a few days at the very least? The Canadiens play Toronto on Thursday, and everybody's looking forward to that. Hopefully, and I mean hopefully, Cedric Paré is not in the Leafs lineup because I'd hate to see what the Canadiens try to do to him. And worst case, it would get the Canadiens off their game a little bit, right? Personally, what I'd like to see is Patrick Laine drop his gloves and beat the living daylights out of him, but that's not going to happen. But at the end of the day, it's the Leafs versus Habs, and it's always interesting, whether it's preseason or otherwise, right? There's always stuff that happens. And, of course, since we start the season against the Leafs in Game 1 of the season, I mean, it'd be interesting to see how things shape up, right? Especially when you're looking at groups that aren't going to be, super powerful, right? You may see the first or second line from the Leafs the same way you might see the first or second line from the Canadiens. So what do we expect in that matchup? Well, there's going to be a lot of speed. There's going to be a lot of physicality. Goaltending, I would presume Montembeault or Fowler are going to get the full game. We'll see. Maybe not. But both of them played very well. And, we'll see how it goes. But there are a couple things that I want to bring up before we continue with the show. And there are a couple of things that were in the news recently that really irked me a little bit. Number one is people trying to spark a goaltending controversy. And listen, guys, I think Marc Dufour was the one at the Canadiens press conference that brought up the lack of respect for Sam Montembeault. And you know what? He's right in a way, because Sam Montembeault is the number one goaltender, and I am as guilty as anybody else of being critical of Montembeault. But the thing is, I'm critical for the right reasons. It's not because, he's an absolutely garbage goaltender. It's because there's work to be done on his technique. He still gives up heavy-duty rebounds. He still has a very poor butterfly. His lateral movement, if you looked at the first game, his legs were not right. And we know at the end of last year, he ended up leaving the playoffs with a groin injury. So it's not as if people are criticizing him because he's played extremely poorly. It's because the Canadiens have other guys coming up from the minors. Jakub Dobeš is going to push him this year. Dobeš is a very strong goaltender. It's very similar to, and I'm not saying this because Montembeault reminds me anything of him, but it's very similar to when Carey Price was supposed to be the number one goalie for Montreal back in 2009, 2010, and it ended up being Halak not only taking the reins during the season, but also in the playoffs. It's very similar to that. And I wouldn't be surprised the Canadiens would be willing to give Jakub Dobeš the starts if Montembeault falters. But it's more than Dobeš. It's the Jacob Fowler effect. But just like anybody else, the Canadiens have been waiting for Fowler for a couple of years now, right? They drafted him a couple of years ago. And, he played extremely well in the NCAA, played well when he had his playoff starts for the Rocket. And so there's a lot to be expected of him. He reminds people a lot of Carey Price in the sense that he's very quiet in goal, he's poised, square to the shot, and doesn't have very much wasted movement. That was how Carey Price goaltended. So people are really excited about him, and they're allowed to be. Marc Dufour can't turn around and say that, why are people not giving respect to Montembeault? People do respect Montembeault, but they also know evolution. And ultimately, the evolution of this team is going to be beyond Sam Montembeault. Sam Montembeault is a third-string goaltender who is now the number one goalie in Montreal with good reason. He's earned it. Don't get me wrong. But Jacob Fowler, just by pedigree, is a much better goaltender than Sam Montembeault. and will be down the road as well. He's still growing. He still needs a full year in the American Hockey League, which he's going to get. But then, as I mentioned, Jakub Dobeš can push Sam Montembeault quite a bit. Now, how Montembeault takes that challenge, that all depends on Sam. Because ultimately, he's never been pushed like this in his career, right? He was 1B to Jake Allen, then became number 1 when Allen was traded, and then remained number 1 up until this point this season, where he's the number 1 goaltender once again. So what happens if he falters and Dobeš comes in and takes over and plays extremely well? Canadians have a decision to make, right? And it's not to trade Montembeault, don't get me wrong. It's about who they're going to start. Monty can sit back and say, you know what, I'm not playing well. And I think, given his character, he'll be the first one to admit it. I think, anyway, because he seems to get along with people and he seems to be very honest with himself. So we'll see what happens. The next thing I wanted to talk about was Juraj Slafkovsky. The kid took a shot in the face today, right? Up on the cheek. Came back, and after that, assisted on the Suzuki goal to make it 3-1. In tonight's hockey game, he proved that he's coming to play. He was physical. He got into all the good areas, got a couple of shots on goal, set up the Suzuki goal, and he was noticeable. So that's what Marty St. Louis wants from him. The more noticeable Slafkovsky is, the more points he's going to get. And that's the Slav we want to see. So let's get away from being critical of Slafkovsky for being a 51-point first round overall pick. No. He's a guy that's only, 22 years old? He's still learning to play within the confines of his body and the league that he's in. Because obviously in Europe, they don't play the same brand of hockey. He's still learning, but he knows what he needs to do. So instead of criticizing him and saying there's urgency around his play, let's see what he brings. You know that Marty St. Louis is going to talk to him if he doesn't, right? And the last thing I want to bring up is about Marty St. Louis and his evolution as a coach. Because I was watching a bunch of clips on the internet today. And the one thing that I noticed is Marty St. Louis was absolutely taking time with every single player in practice. Whether it was Demidov yesterday or anybody else today. Each individual player got a couple of minutes with the head coach. Not by design. If there was something that Marty wanted to say, he pulled them aside and he had a word with them. And he did it with every single player on the ice. And to me, that speaks volumes towards the type of coach that Marty is. Much more in tune with how he wants his team to start fast. So he's out there being proactive as far as teaching. And that's what coaching is, after all, teaching. The last few years, it was more about adapting, teaching, and developing. Now, the development phase is done and buried. Now he's teaching, not only to play a better style of game, but he's teaching to win. Because that's what Marty St. Louis is. He's a winner. We all know that. So how that translates remains to be seen. But the focus that he's got with each individual player is really, really impressive. And you got to give him points for that. And anybody that criticizes Marty St. Louis from here on out in the comments of this show, please don't. And speaking of the comments of this show, one last thing. I have no problem with anybody criticizing me. I'm a big boy. I can take it, right? I'll respond. Sometimes I'll be rude. Not extremely rude, but sometimes I'll be rude. And other times I'll be, you know what? You're right. Whatever the case is. But I draw the line at people that mention things about my kids. And when I did the video about Lane Hudson's dad, I'm not talking about my own personal kids. I've been working in hockey with junior teams for the better part of 20 years. And I've watched players whose parents have absolutely railroaded their careers. In fact, just not last year, but the year before, there was a goaltender for a certain team whose father was so critical not only of his own son, but other players on the ice, that ultimately he got traded away from the team I was working for. Why? Because the father would yell, if his son was having a poor game, pull him out, he sucks. His own dad. So when I talk about the detriment that the comments of some parents can have, including making a blanket statement that he thinks his kids, both his kids, not just Lane, would adhere to, is not just irresponsible as a parent, but it's just not right. So don't take that and equated to my kids getting drafted to the NHL, because I have 2 girls, right? They're not getting drafted to the NHL. And equated to my experience dealing with players, because I've done it for a long time at all levels of hockey. And I've had parents who were good. I've had parents who were bad. More good than bad. I have to say I've been very lucky. But the bad ones, like the example I just gave you, they're the type of parents you don't want to have around the rink because it's in poor taste for the entire team, and it reflects poorly on the organization, whether you're at home or whether the games are away, because you know he's going to open his mouth when he's not in the home rink too, right? So that's it for the post-game show tonight. We thank our sponsors, instacustoms.com and cheapesttshirts.ca. Go check them out because, like I mentioned, they do great work, fast, and the quality is there. Trust me on this. See you guys tomorrow.